Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, born on November 30th, 1874, was a key figure in World War II and one of Britain's most famous leaders. Known for his stirring speeches and unwavering determination, he became Prime Minister in 1940 and guided the UK through its darkest hours, including the Blitz. His leadership and alliances with the US and Soviet Union were crucial in defeating Germany, making him a symbol of resilience during the war. Even though he was a hero to the Allies, the rest of the world saw him as a merciless monster. During the Bengal famine of 1943, his policies worsened the crisis, leading to millions of deaths, and he dismissed it with racist remarks. A staunch imperialist, he resisted decolonization and supported brutal crackdowns like those in Kenya during the Mau Mau uprising. He also advocated for chemical weapons against rebels in Iraq and held deeply racist views. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Franklin D. Roosevelt was the 32nd president of the U.S. and one of its most influential leaders. Serving 4 terms from 1933 to 1945, he led the country through 2 massive challenges, the Great Depression and World War II. At first, FDR kept the U.S. out of the war, but supported the Allies with programs like Lend-Lease, which sent weapons and supplies to countries fighting Nazi Germany. After Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the U.S. joined the war, and Roosevelt worked closely with leaders like Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin to plan the Allied strategy. Roosevelt's presidency was cut short when he died in April 1945, just a few months before the Allies won World War II. Chiang Kai-Shek. Chiang Kai-Shek was China's leader during World War II and the head of the Nationalist Party. He led the fight against Japan after they invaded in 1937, even though his forces were outmatched. As part of the Allies, he worked with leaders like Roosevelt and Churchill and attended the Cairo Conference to plan post-war Asia. At the same time, he was also fighting Mao Zedong's communists, which made things worse for China during the war and led to a civil war later. After losing to the communists in 1949, Chiang fled to Taiwan and ruled there until he died in 1975. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was a dictator who ruled the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s until his death in 1953. Stalin rose to power after the death of Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union, and he implemented a series of brutal policies to consolidate his control. Stalin's rule was characterized by totalitarianism, political repression, and the use of propaganda to maintain power. Stalin implemented a series of economic plans that led to rapid industrialization, but also caused widespread famine and hardship, particularly in rural areas. During World War II, Stalin played a key role in defeating Nazi Germany. After Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Stalin's Red Army led major victories, like the Battle of Stalingrad, which helped turn the tide of the war. By the end of the conflict, the USSR had become a superpower, setting the stage for the Cold War with the United States. Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini was an Italian political leader who founded and led the National Fascist Party. Born on July 29, 1883, he initially worked as a journalist before becoming involved in politics. In 1922, Mussolini became the Prime Minister of Italy after leading a successful coup known as the March on Rome. As Prime Minister, Mussolini gradually dismantled democratic institutions, established a totalitarian regime, and declared himself dictator, taking the title Il Duce. His regime emphasized nationalism, militarism, and the suppression of political opposition. Mussolini sought to restore Italy to its former Roman glory and embarked on aggressive foreign policies, including the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. During World War II, Mussolini allied Italy with Nazi Germany and Japan, forming the Axis powers. However, Italy's military failures and the Allied invasion in 1943 led to his downfall. He was removed from power and arrested, but later rescued by German forces and installed as the leader of a puppet state in northern Italy. Mussolini's rule ended in 1945 when he was captured and executed by Italian partisans on April 28, 1945. Hideki Tojo. Hideki Tojo was a Japanese military leader and prime minister who served during World War II. As prime minister, Tojo was a key figure in Japan's decision to enter World War II, particularly with the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, which brought the United States into the war. He oversaw Japan's military operations throughout the Pacific and Southeast Asia, aiming to establish a Japanese empire. Tojo's leadership was marked by authoritarianism, militarism, and a strict adherence to the ideology of the Japanese Empire. His policies included the suppression of dissent and the imposition of harsh measures in occupied territories. However, Japan's military setbacks and resource shortages ultimately led to his resignation in July 1944. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Tojo was arrested, tried by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, and found guilty of war crimes, including ordering atrocities against civilians and prisoners of war. He was executed on December 23, 1948. Emperor Hirohito. Emperor Hirohito was Japan's longest-reigning emperor, presiding over a tumultuous period that included the country's militaristic expansion and World War II. While his exact role in the events of the war remains a topic of debate, his reign saw some of the most infamous atrocities committed by Japan, including the Nanking Massacre, where hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians were murdered, and Unit 731, which conducted horrifying human experiments. Hirohito's leadership is criticized for his inability, or unwillingness, to intervene or prevent these events, even though he was the symbolic head of state. After Japan's defeat in 1945, Hirohito was allowed to remain on the throne but was reduced to a purely ceremonial figure. Hitler, as the leader of Germany, became one of the most impactful figures in modern history. His aggressive leadership led to the outbreak of World War II, a conflict that changed the world forever. Hitler's rise to power was fueled by his vision of a German empire and a deep-rooted belief in racial superiority. Once in control, he transformed Germany into a military powerhouse. His forces used blitzkrieg tactics, fast and overwhelming military strikes that allowed them to conquer much of Europe in record time. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, officially starting World War II, and by 1940, Hitler's army had taken down France in a stunning victory. His confidence skyrocketed as the German military seemed unstoppable, and he strengthened the Axis powers by forming alliances with Italy and Japan. But Hitler's ambition got the better of him. His biggest mistake came in 1941 when he launched Operation Barbarossa, invading the Soviet Union. The campaign stretched German forces too thin and exposed them to brutal winters and fierce Soviet resistance. On top of that, after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, he declared war on the United States. As the war raged on, the tide began to turn against Nazi Germany. The Allies, led by the Soviet Union, the US, and Britain, scored major victories in Italy and the Eastern Front. In 1944, the D-Day invasion opened a crucial front in Western Europe, speeding up Germany's defeat. With his empire collapsing, Hitler retreated to an underground bunker in Berlin, where he spent the war's final months. As Soviet forces closed in on the city, he faced the reality of inevitable defeat. In April 1945, rather than surrender, Hitler took his own life, marking the end of the Nazi regime.